Hello everyone. In this lecture we are going to do some exercises related to fixed effect modeling in meta-analysis. I'll be taking three kinds of studies. Um, First type of studies will be studies in which the outcome variable will be given in mean plus minus standard deviation. Second kind of studies will be, well, the outcome variable is in the form of a binary data. So, and third will be studies in which the outcome variable is a correlation coefficient. So before that, before we move to these exercises, just want to give you an overview of what is the difference between fixed effect modeling and random effect modeling in meta-analysis. Okay, so in fixed effect modeling, hold on. So in the fixed effect modeling, as the name itself implies, we assume that the studies, all these studies, they have a one true effect size. Okay, so let's say we have 7 studies. The assumption is that there is one true effect size, let's call it maybe 10%. So that is the true effect size and that is common for all the studies. Okay, so it does not vary from one study to another study that we take in the meta-analysis. The effect size is common, the true effect size is same for all the studies, right? And so whatever differences you see in the observed studies, those differences are due to sampling error. So this type of modeling is called fixed effect or singular effect modeling. If you don't understand, I can show you with the help of a diagram. Let's assume you have 3 studies in your meta-analysis. So the assumption in a fixed effect modeling, in a fixed effect model, is that the true study effect is same for all the studies. For example, let's assume it's 20%. So this black line represents the true effect size, which is common for all the 3 studies, right? But obviously when you will compute the effect size for these 3 studies, whatever you are computing, whether it's odds ratio, risk ratio, standard mean difference, unstandardized mean difference, it could be any effect size. The effect size that you will compute for each of these 3 studies, it will not be 20%, it will be different from 20%. So that is what we call observed effect. So the observed effect in study 1 may be slightly less than this. Observed study effect size in study 2 may be slightly more than this true effect size, and observed effect in study 3 might be a bit more than this blue line, right? So these differences that you see, right, this difference between the true effect size, which should have been what you observe but you didn't observe, and the observed effect, is simply due to sampling error. Okay, so that is the assumption in fixed effect model. I hope this is clear. So I've also written in Hindi for any audience who understands. सभी स्टडीज़ का ट्रू इफेक्ट फिक्स्ड है, लेकिन रैंडम सैम्पलिंग के कारण उनके अंदर अंतर दिखाई देता है. सो ऑल दी स्टडीज़ in reality the true effect size is same, it's 20%, but we will not see 20% when we compute the effect size, and the difference will be due to sampling error. Okay, because I will explain how this happens, but in sampling error, because your sample is not infinite, the observed effect size will not be the same as true effect size. It could be slightly less or more, but the main point you have to remember is the effect is fixed, means the true effect is fixed and same for all the studies which we are including in the meta-analysis, right? On the contrary, by contrast, under the random effect model, we allow that the true effect size can itself vary from study to study. For example, the effect size will be higher or lower in studies where participants are older or more educated or healthier than others, or when a more intensive variant of intervention is used, and so on. So I will show you with the help of a diagram. See, this is the assumption in a random effect model, that the true effect size itself varies. Okay, can you notice the difference here? The true effect size was a single line, so the true effect size was fixed. But in random effect modeling, the assumption is that the true effect of the drug itself varies from study to study. How is this possible? It is possible because different studies have different variables. Different studies may have different age group patients, or different studies may have different dose of the intervention, right? It could be different studies could be in different ethnic groups. So for whatever reasons, it's possible that the true effect of the drug itself, or the true effect of whatever intervention for which you are doing this meta-analysis itself varies from study to study. So in random effect modeling, the assumption is that the true effect varies from study to study, and it exists almost in the form of a normal distribution curve. Okay, so the true effects size, it varies from study to study depending on different variables. So let's say again we are doing a meta-analysis of 3 studies. So the observed effect in study 1, the observed effect in study 2, and observed effect in study 3, they are assumed to be random samples from this distribution of the true effect size, which we assume in random effect modeling. Okay, so if I have to put this concept into Hindi, we can say something like सभी studies का observed effect एक true effect के distribution का random sample है. I hope this makes sense. The true effect of the drug itself exists in the form of a Gaussian distribution or normal distribution. The true effect is not fixed. That is why it is called random effects modeling. Remember, it's effects, not effect. Okay, so fixed effect, it's singular, but it's random effects, this is plural. So the true effect size of the drug itself exists in the form of a normal distribution, and whatever observed effects that you are seeing in your various studies in your meta-analysis, they are just random samples from this distribution. So I will read it again now, hopefully it will make sense. Because studies, they differ in the mixes of participants, in the implementation of intervention, among other reasons, there may be different effect sizes underlying different studies. So the true effect itself, we assume it is varying from study to study because of different covariates or different factors which can influence the effect size of the drug. So if it were possible to perform an infinite number of studies based on the inclusion criteria for analysis, the true effect sizes of these studies would be distributed about some mean. So as I explained, the true effect of the drug, okay, the true effect sizes for all the studies, if we were to do infinite studies, we would obtain something like this. This black Gaussian distribution, this represented the true effect size across all the studies if we were able to do infinite number of studies. Okay, so the effect size in the studies that actually were performed are assumed to represent a random sample of these effect sizes. So hence it is called as a random effects modeling, right? So I hope this is clear. Now so what is summary effect? When we compute summary effect in meta-analysis, the interpretation of that summary effect changes from what kind of modeling you are doing. Okay, that is why this concept is important to understand. So in fixed effect modeling, the assumption is that the true effect size is fixed across all the studies. So when you compute a summary effect in your meta-analysis, that summary effect is supposed to represent, it's supposed to be the closest to representative of the true study effect. Okay, so it is supposed to be like as close to 20% as possible. That is summary effect in a fixed effect model. But when you do a random effect modeling and you compute a summary effect, the interpretation of the summary effect in your meta-analysis is different. The interpretation of that summary effect is that summary effect is actually the mean of this Gaussian distribution of the true effect sizes. Okay, so I'll just read it. The summary effect is nothing more than the mean of the effect sizes with more weight assigned to more precise studies. So we'll come back to this concept later on also when I make a separate lecture for random effect modeling. But for now you understand that the interpretation of the summary effect in meta-analysis, it depends on what modeling you are doing. Okay, so these are some symbols we will use to represent the true effect and the observed effect. When you're talking about individual studies, we'll use the circle to represent the true effect, and we'll use a square to represent the observed effect. And you know that the true effect and observed effect are never the same. True effect is something we will never know. This is a hypothetical concept. And observed effect is something we actually compute in our studies. And why the true effect is not the same as observed effect is because of sampling error, right? Similarly, when you will have true effects for all the studies, you will combine these true effects and you will get you will combine all the observed effects of individual studies and you will get a combined summary effect, combined observed effect from all the studies. And there is also something, you can say hypothetically, there is a combined true effect of all the studies as well, right? So So what is the difference between true effect and observed effect? As I told you, studies true effect size is the effect size in the underlying population, and is the effect size we would observe if the study had an infinitely large sample size. So it's not possible to do a study which has infinitely large sample size, but if you were to do a study which has infinitely large sample size, then there would be no sampling error, and hence the effect you would observe, that hypothetical effect, which effect size, that would be the true effect size. However, because we do not have the capacity to have an infinite sample size, we take a limited sample size, and the effects, this effect size we compute from those studies of limited sample size, that is called as a study's observed effect size. And we know that observed effect size is never the same as true effect size, and the difference is attributed to the sampling error. So the true effect size is the effect size in the population, and we would get this true effect size only if we had an infinite sample in our individual studies in the meta-analysis. However, because you are not taking an infinitely large sample size, you are taking a limited sample size, so in your sample the effect that you observe, that is called as the observed effect. And observed effect is nothing but true effect plus minus sampling error. So whatever difference is there between observed effect and true effect, that difference is due to sampling error. So now that you understand the basics of fixed effect modeling, okay, just a little bit more perhaps, and then we'll start with the first exercise of the fixed effect modeling. So as I've told you before, in the fixed effect modeling, the assumption is that all the studies, they share their true effect size, right? So all the studies in the meta-analysis, they share a common true effect size. Put another way, all the factors which could influence the effect size are same across all the studies. So we assume that the dose of the intervention, or whatever the groups being tested, the patient population, whatever factors that can influence the true effect size of the drug, they are same across all the studies, and for this reason the true effect size will remain same across all the studies. That is the assumption in a fixed effect modeling. So that is why it is called as a fixed effect model, because the assumption is that the effect of the drug is fixed across all the studies. Okay, so I will take an example. Let's assume that the true effect size is 0.60, and this effect we'll assume as the true effect of the drug. Okay, so it will be, because we are doing a fixed effect modeling right now, we'll assume that the true effect is 0.6 for all the studies, right? So now we want to see the effect of sampling error. So suppose we do 3 or 4 studies, the effect size that we will compute will be the observed effect size, as I've told you, and obviously it will vary from one study to another study. Why? Because of sampling error or random error, which is inherent to each study. If the study had an infinitely large sample size, the sampling error would be 0, and the observed effect will be exactly the same as true effect, but that is not the case. So we'll take 3 studies. In first study, we observed an effect size of 0.40. In another study, so this is being denoted by y1. In study 2, we observed an effect size of y2, that we computed as 0.70, and in study 3 we got an effect size of 0.50. So as you can see, even though the true effect size is same, it is 0.6 in all the studies, because we are doing a fixed effect modeling, but the observed effects are different, and the observed effects are different because of the sampling error. So I can say, for example, in this case the sampling error is minus 0.2. In this case the sampling error is plus 0.1, and in this study 3 the sampling error is minus 0.1, right? So the observed effect and true effects are not same because of the sampling error. So you can say that the observed effect is equal to the true effect plus minus sampling error, and this can be seen in this diagram also. You can see these circles, they represent the true effect size. So you can see, because we are doing a fixed effect modeling, the true effect size is same across all the studies, and it is 0.6. Because the true effect size are same across all 3 studies, obviously the summary effect will also be the same. It will also be 0.6 only, right? So this is the true effect sizes. Okay, so these are the true effect sizes of individual studies, and this is the true effect size of the combined true effect size, or it is a summary effect basically. But because this is just hypothetical, obviously when we compute these the study effects, you will find something called as observed effects. So in study 1, let's say this is the observed effect, in study 2 this is the observed effect, and study 3 this is the observed effect. And you can see the difference between these observed effects and the true effects. This difference is the sampling error, right? And obviously you have these 3 observed effects, and you will compute a summary effect from these observed effects also. So that is being represented by the yellow diamond here. So this is the observed summary effect. So these are the observed study effects of individual studies, and this is the observed summary effect of the studies combined. And you can see that the true summary effect and the observed summary effect, they also have a difference, and that difference is because of the sampling error, obviously, right? So while the error in any given study is random, we can estimate the sampling distribution of errors. So another concept you can see, as I've shown you, that the true effect size is same across all the studies. It is 0.6 for all the studies, because we are assuming a fixed effect model, and the summary effect is also 0.6. The observed effects, as you can see, they are somewhat different, less or more than the true effect size. So this distribution, do you see this Gaussian distribution? So this is nothing but the distribution of sampling error. So how to explain this concept? See, in study 1 you had a less sample size, okay? Because of less sample size, the distribution looks very wide, so the sampling error is more. You can see this difference is more. So this is the distribution of the sampling error in study 1. Because the sample size was less, you would expect the standard error, or you can simply say the width of the sampling error. This is the distribution of sampling error. So because the sample size was less, the standard error of this distribution will be more. But in study 2, the sample size was little bit more. So because of large sample size, the width of this sampling error distribution is less, okay? So standard error is less, and you can see that the observed effect is much closer to the true effect. In study 3, similarly, you can see this sample size is quite less, and because of less sample size, the width of the sampling error distribution, the distribution of sampling error is quite big, and width is big because obviously the standard error is more, okay? So these are the distributions of sampling error, and it makes sense that in those studies, in those studies which have a large sample size, the width of the distribution of sampling error would be less, because in those studies, because of large sample size, the sampling error would be less. So the standard error, which is like the width of this distribution curve, it will be less. And let's assume we had a study which had an infinitely large sample size, then this width will be almost 0, because the observed effect will approximate the true effect, okay? So I'll just read it for you. As sample size increases, you can understand that the sampling error will decrease, right? And when the sample size becomes infinity, then the sampling error will almost become 0, and in that case the observed effect of the study will almost be equal to the true effect of the study. So this width basically that you see, right, this width that you see, this width is due to less sample size. This width is more in those studies which have less sample size, and this width will be less in those studies which have a large sample size. And when the sample size approaches infinity, then the width of this distribution of sampling error will almost be 0, because there would be no sampling error, right? So the width of this sampling this distribution of sampling error would almost be 0, and the observed effect will approximate the true effect, okay? So you can just remember this equation: observed effect is equal to true effect plus minus sampling error, and this sampling error depends on the sample size. As the sample size increases and as it approaches infinity, the sampling error will become equal to 0, and the observed effect will be equal to true effect, and the width of this the distribution of sampling error will almost disappear, okay? So the distribution that I just showed you, the distribution of sampling error, the width of that distribution is based on the square root of variance or standard error. So this width that you see, right, this is proportional to the variance. And you know what is variance? Variance is nothing but the square, it is variance is standard error square, right? Or you can also say standard error is under root variance. So the width of this sampling error, this is called the distribution of sampling error, and the width is proportional to standard error actually, or you can say width is proportional to under root of variance. Okay, the width of the normal curve is based on the square root of variance or the standard error, and as the sample size increases, as you can see for study 2, the standard error will decrease, and as the standard error will decrease, the width of this distribution, sampling error distribution, will decrease, and the observed effect size will approximate the true effect size. So in case of fixed effect modeling, that I will explain to you right now with some examples, the summary effect is our estimate of the common effect size. Okay, and the null hypothesis is that the common effect is 0 for a difference or 1 for a ratio. Okay, I'll come back to that when we perform exercises, but the idea is that in a fixed effect modeling, this is what we are going to estimate in our exercises, this observed summary effect. And in a fixed effect modeling, in a fixed effect model, the observed summary effect is basically the closest approximation of the summary true the summary effect of the true effect size. Okay, so this, how to put this, is basically this diamond is the closest approximation of this inverted triangle. What your inverted triangle was the summary true effect, right? The true summary effect, right? So this is your observed summary effect. So your this is what we will compute, the observed summary effect, which is the closest approximation to the closest approximation of the true summary effect. So I'll explain to you the steps of doing a fixed effect modeling and computing observed summary effect, and after explaining these steps, I will go I'll go forward with 3 exercises, and hopefully we'll practice. So the first step is always you have to compute the effect sizes. Effect size, you have to compute a common effect size index for all the individual studies. So let's say we'll take like maybe 5-6 studies in most of our examples. Whatever effect size index you want to compute, it could be standardized mean difference, unstandardized mean difference, it could be response ratio, odds ratio, risk ratio, or it could be risk difference, it could be a correlation coefficient. So that you will choose based on your understanding of these studies, but you have to compute a common effect size index for all the studies. That will be the first step that we'll be doing. After that, for this effect size that you have computed for all the studies, you will compute the variance of this effect size and the standard error of this effect size. Then the next step is to assign weights to these studies, and because we are doing a fixed effect modeling right now, the weight assigned to each study, it is the inverse or the reciprocal of the variance. So once you have computed the variance of the effect size, you will reciprocate that, just you have to do 1 by variance, and then you can calculate the weight, the relative weight of that study. Okay, so this is the first part. When you have computed weights, now you are ready to compute the summary effect. So remember the calculations for summary effect, for doing the calculations of summary effect, if your effect size index is in the form of some ratio, for example, if it is odds ratio, risk ratio, response ratio, or also in case of correlation coefficient, you have to do the calculation of the summary effect size in logarithmic form. So you cannot take the you cannot assign the weights to the study based on variance of risk ratio, but based on variance of logarithmic risk ratio, and we'll come to those examples, you'll understand hopefully. So how to compute the summary effect size index? This is the formula. You will multiply the relative weight of the study with the effect size, and you will compute the summary of this product, and this you will divide with the total summation of the weights of all the study. If this does not make sense, it will make sense when we do the exercises. Then you have to compute. So you have computed the summary effect size, okay, which is also denoted by diamonds in forest plots. Then you have to compute the variance as well. So to compute the variance, it's very easy, just 1 by summation of the all the weights of the studies. And remember how you assign weights. This is very important. In a fixed effect modeling, the weights are the inverse of the variance of the effect size. Okay, now you have computed the summary effect size, you have computed the variance also. So then you can compute the standard error, right, because it is just under root of variance of the summary effect. Now you have computed the standard error, so now you can calculate the lower limit and the upper limit of the 95% confidence interval. So the formula is pretty easy. Summary effect plus minus 1.96 into standard error. So summary effect minus 1.96 into standard error, that will be lower limit, and summary effect size plus 1.96 into standard error, that will be the upper limit of your 95% confidence interval. After that, you have to calculate the Z statistic. Z statistic is nothing but your summary effect size divided by the standard error of that summary effect. And lastly, you have to calculate the p values. So p values, you can either calculate one-tailed or two-tailed, depends on the hypothesis, your alternative hypothesis. So for one-tailed p value, usually we'll assume that we have made, I'll just show you calculations using this p value, in which we assume that we have made prediction in the right direction. So this will be the formula 1 minus this is a function, this is the normal distribution function. So 1 minus normal distribution of Z statistic, and in two-tailed the formula is exactly the same. It will be just double of this p value. Remember that when we are making the prediction in the right direction, then one-tailed p values are usually exactly half of the two-tailed p values, right? But if you have made the prediction in the opposite direction, this formula will be a little bit different. It will be 1 minus normal distribution of minus Z, okay, not Z. Then lastly, if your effect size is in the form of logarithm or in the form of Fisher Z in case of correlation coefficient, then you can convert them back into their original form, and we will see examples on how to do that. So we'll start with our first example, that is we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 studies, and we'll be doing a meta-analysis. The study results are being reported as mean and standard deviation. So we have two groups. We have so these are the names of the studies, or you can assume the name of the authors rather who did the studies, and in each study you have a treated group and a control group. You can assume this study to be of whatever you want. Maybe this is some study of some anti-diabetic medication or something, and you have some values, right? It is maybe mean hemoglobin, mean blood pressure, it could be anything. The point is it is a continuous variable, and along with the mean you have been given the standard deviation and the sample size in the treated group, as well as the sample size in control group, and the mean in the control group and the standard deviation in the control group. So I will show you how we compute effect size, which is the first step using first study. So you know that this is a continuous data, right? So in case of continuous data, you have to use this formula. Okay, so this is a continuous data, right? So we have to compute, first we will compute the summary effect, the variance of the summary effect, and the standard error of the summary effect. So this is the formula you will use, and you can compute, usually you can either take raw mean difference or standardized mean difference, or you can also take response ratio. In this case we go with standardized mean difference. So this is the formula for standardized mean difference. It will be mean in one group minus mean in two group divided by the standard deviation within the groups. And the standard deviation within the groups, this is the formulas: n1 minus 1. n1 is the sample size of study of the treated group, n2 will be the sample size of the control group. So n1 minus 1, s1 square. s1 is the standard deviation in treated group, and S2 is the standard deviation in control group. So n1 minus 1 S1 square, n2 minus 1 S2 square divided by n1 plus n2 minus 2. So that is the standard deviation within the groups. This will be divided by the difference in the means of the two groups, and that will give you the standardized mean difference. To calculate the variance of the standardized mean difference, this is the formula you will use, and you will then just do under root of this to get the standard error. This is something called as a Hedges D. So to get you can also do a correction in this Hedges D to get I'm so sorry, this is called as a Cohen's D. This D is called as a Cohen's D, and pardon for my error. So this D, or the standardized mean difference, this is the formula for Cohen's D. You can also do correction in this Cohen's D to get a more unbiased estimate of this D, that will be called as the Hedges G. So it has been seen that this D, Cohen's D, is sometimes doing some kind of overestimation of the actual unstandardized of the actual standardized mean difference. So we'll do a correction in this Cohen's D to get Hedges G, although this is not, they are not very different when the sample size is quite high. So you can use this formula, G is equals to J into D, where J is 1 minus 3 by 4 degree of freedom. Degree of freedom is n1 plus n2 minus 2. And similarly you can compute a variance in Hedges G also, that will be J square into Vd, and again the standard error in G will be under root of Vg. So under root of variance in G. So it's I'll show you how to do this quickly. You have the mean, that is 94, standard error is 92, again mean is 92, standard deviation is 20. So you will just do 94 minus 92 divided by S within, and you can calculate S within. In place of n1 you can put 60, in place of n2 also it will be 60, right? In place of S1 it will be 22, in place of S2 it will be 20. So S2 it will be 20. So like that you can compute the S within. Similarly, by using this formula you can compute the variance. You can use this formula if you want to calculate if you want to go further and convert the Cohen's D into Hedges G, you can use this formula as well for the correction. So after using these formulas, what you will get is this. This is the effect size that this is the Hedges G for this one study, right? Similarly, you can obtain Hedges G or your standardized mean difference for all the individual studies, and using this formula, which is the variance formula, right? This is the variance ka formula for G, that is J square into Vd, and Vd you can calculate. Similarly, you will get the variance of this effect size as well. Now this is the important part. We have talked before that in fixed effect modeling, the relative weight assigned to each study is nothing but the reciprocal of the variance. So now that you have the variance in each of the studies, you can just do their reciprocal. So for instance, first study ka relative weight will be 1 divided by 0.033. So like that you can compute weights for each of these studies, and this will be the total weight, right? Now what you have to do to compute the summary effect, you have to first multiply the variances in each study with the weight of each study. Okay, so that will be the W into Y. Remember, oh I'm so sorry, you have to multiply the weight in each study with the effect size in each study. So these two things you have to multiply, so it will be weight into the effect size, so that will be WY. So for one study, first study I can show you, it will be 0.095 into 330.352. So like that you will compute the product of the effect size and the weight. So you can understand what we are trying to do is nothing, we are trying to calculate the weighted mean. Okay, summary effect is nothing but the weighted mean of all the studies, because each study has a different weight, and those studies which have more weight, they will contribute more to the summary effect. And which studies will have more weight? Obviously those studies which have less variance, right? It makes sense that studies which have less variance, because they had more sample size, they are more precise studies, so they should contribute more weight to our meta-analysis. So when a study weight is less, when a study's variance is less, the weight is automatically more, because the variance is weight is nothing but the reciprocal of variance, and when the study weight is more, it will contribute more to the summary effect. So we'll multiply the weight of the study with the effect size of the study, right? So this is the weight of relative weight of the study, and this is the effect size of the first study. They will be multiplied. That will give us wy. Now you will sum up all the wy's, and you will divide this with the summation of the weights of the study. So this is your summary effect, summation of wy divided by summation of w. So in this example it will be 101.171 divided by 244. So this is the summary effect. You can understand what is summary effect. It is nothing but the weighted mean of the individual studies, right? Now you have to compute the variance of the summary effect. So remember, in a forest plot we denote this kind of summary effect usually with a diamond, right? Now we have to calculate the variance of this summary effect. To calculate the variance of the summary effect is nothing but the inverse or the reciprocal of the summation of the weights. So you know what is the summation of weights? It is 244.215. So we'll do just the reciprocal of this, and this will get the variance. So this is the variance of the summary effect, and as you will expect, the variance of the summary effect is much less than the variance of the individual studies, right? So that is the whole point of doing a meta-analysis, is to compute a summary effect which is having less variance than each of the studies separately, right? So obviously the summary effect is a very precise estimate of the effect size, right? Because it has so less variance. Its variance is very less, 0.004. Compare it to the variance of the individual studies, it is much less, right? So more precise estimate of the effect size. That is the whole point of doing this meta-analysis. So now you have the summary effect, now you have the, and you also have the variance of the summary effect. Now you can calculate the standard error of this summary effect. So you know standard error will be the under root of this variance. So this will be the standard error, and you can calculate the upper limit and the lower limit of the summary effect. How? Just summary effect is 0.414 minus 1.96 into standard error, that will be the lower limit of 95% CI, and 0.414 plus 1.96 into standard error, that will be the upper limit of the 95% confidence interval. So this is the summary effect, and this is the standard error. So like that you can compute the lower limit and the upper limit of the summary effect, right? So pretty straightforward and very easy, literally something you can do with your own hands. Don't even need a software for this. So this is these are the steps that we have followed till now. We computed the effect size for each individual studies. For that we just needed three things. We needed the mean of the treated and the control group, and the standard error from the treatment and the control group, and the sample sizes of the treatment and the control group. And using just these three variables we can compute the effect size. In this case we calculated the standardized mean difference. We have to know the variance of these effect size, and once you have the variance of the individual studies, you can just do reciprocal of that to get the relative weight of the individual studies in a fixed effect modeling. Now once you have the weight, you have to multiply the weight with the effect size, right? Because what is the summary effect? It is nothing but the weighted mean, right? So we'll do w into y, and then the summation of wy will divide with the summation of w to get the summary effect. Then you can calculate the variance of the summary effect. After that you can calculate the lower limit and the upper limit of 95% CI of the summary effect. So that is what we have done till now. We still have to calculate the p-values. Remember, we will test the null hypothesis, whether the null hypothesis in this case is that the treatment and the control group, they have the difference is 0. The difference in the standardized mean difference between the two groups is 0. That is the null hypothesis in this case, and we have to compute the p-values for them as, for this null hypothesis. But right now I just want to show you this forest plot. So you can see we have calculated the hedges G, and we are doing a fixed effect modeling. These were the studies that we took in our meta-analysis, and we just calculated the summary effect with our own hands. It was 0.41. And what are these relative weights? These are nothing but you know how to calculate the weights of the individual studies, right? For first study it was 30.352 and total weights were 244.215. So what will be the relative weight of the first study? It will be 30 by 244 into 100. right? So they have just shown it in percentage, and obviously you would expect that the total relative weight will be 100%. So this is the summary effect, and you can see this is being shown by this diamond here, the observed summary effect. It is 0.41, and this thing, okay, I need to use another pen. This thing, this difference that you can see, this is nothing but the this is the lower limit of the 95% CI and the upper limit of the 95% CI that we just calculated. And you can see how this summary effect is so much more precise than the individual studies, because the 95% CI is much less as compared to the individual studies. So now we'll come to calculation of the p-value. So you know, to calculate the p-value you need to know the z statistic. So what is the z statistic? It is summary effect divided by the standard error of the summary effect. So we know the summary effect is 0.41, and we know the standard error of the summary effect is here 0.0640. So 0.41 divided by 0.0640. So z statistic will be 6.4739. Now that you have z statistic, you can use these formulas and you can compute this part in Excel. So you'll find a function named, the name of the function is norm s dist in Excel. Okay, so you can just try it in your Excel. You will have to go and you have to perform this function for this z value. You know how to calculate z value. In this case it is 6.4739. so when you compute this function norms distribution for the z value 6.4739, then you will get some value, and that you have to subtract from 1. So that will be your p-value, that will be your one-tailed p-value. And if you want to compute two-tailed p-value, it will be nothing but 2 into this whole thing. Okay, so it will be just double of this one-tailed p-value, and this is the one-tailed p-value when we made the prediction in the right direction. Okay, so it will be very small. I forgot what the norms distribution for this z statistic was. You can do it in your Excel. It's very less actually. So you'll get the individual p-values. Okay, so in simple words, we have in this example we did a fixed effect modeling, and in this fixed effect modeling we calculated HSG, or the summary effect, observed summary effect was 0.41, and we also calculated the 95% confidence in the lower limit and the upper limit of the 95% confidence intervals, and that came out to be, if you remember, they were 0.29 and upper limit was 0.54, right? Then we calculated the z statistic, which was the summary effect divided by the standard error of that summary effect, and that was 6.47. Then we calculated the p-values, the one-tailed p-value and the two-tailed p-value. So this is how you do a meta-analysis in using fixed effect modeling, when the data is given in terms of like the data is a continuous variable and it is given in terms of mean and standard deviation. Okay, now I want to take another example. In this example, instead of reporting the outcome variable in terms of mean and standard deviations, the outcome variable is reported as a binary data. So it is in terms of events and non-events. The procedure is pretty much same except for how you compute the effect size, and one difference is also there, that the calculations for summary effect in case of ratios, because this kind of data, binary data, usually we calculate effect sizes in terms of ratios like odds ratio, risk ratio, right? So when you compute an effect size in terms of ratio, then the calculations for the effect size, the summary effect, that they need to be done in the logarithmic form. So that is the only difference. Apart from that, it's pretty much the same, and I hope you'll understand as we go through this example. So you can see this is the representation that I have given. You will have a treated group and you will have a control group, right? And for both the groups you will have events. For example, it could be MACE events or whatever. In case of cardiovascular trials, it could be MACE events maybe. So you'll have events and non-events, and then you'll have a sample size for each of the group, treated and control group. So in this example, I'll just show you quickly. We'll have, let's say we have the event is death and non-event is being alive. So you can calculate the odds ratio or the risk ratio depending on whatever you choose, right? Odds ratio will be like 5 by 95 divided by 10 by 90 for treated by control, whereas risk ratio will be 5 by 100 divided by 10 by 100 for treated by control. So that depends on what you decide to do, whether you decide to have odds ratio or risk ratio, but whatever it is, it should be same for all the studies in the meta-analysis. So we'll take this example. Again, we have 1 2 3 4 5 6 studies, right? And you have the binary data for all these studies. We'll see for first study done by Saint et al. You can see the sample size in the treated group is 95, the sample size in the control group is also 95, and these are the number of events and non-events in the control group, and these are the number of events and non-events in the these were the number of events and non-events in treated group and number of events and non-events in control group. So you have the data for just the binary outcome data for all the individual studies, and that's all you need to start. Okay, so, just like in previous example we had mean and standard deviation and sample sizes, here we have events and non-events and sample sizes. So now the first step is always you compute a common summary effect for all these studies. So in this case we are choosing to compute odds ratio. So we'll compute the odds ratio for the first study. I'll show you how to do that. So this is the formula for odds ratio. This may be quite familiar. So it is events by non-events in treated group divided by events and non-events in control group. So I'll just show you. So we know it is 12 by 52 in the treated group, and I will have to divide that with 16 by 49 in the control group. So this is the odds ratio for the study 1. Right. So now that I've computed the odds ratio, I unfortunately cannot compute the summary effect in terms of odds ratio. This is the only difference that I want you to know, that when you have the effect size in terms of ratio, or even in case of correlation coefficient, which will come to in the third exercise, the summary effect has to be computed in the logarithmic form only. And if you want to understand that, we can have a chota sa discussion at the end. It just keeps things symmetrical, like it makes sense to have this in logarithmic form. So I'll compute the log of this odds ratio. I'll take the natural logarithmic of this odds ratio, and then I will calculate the variance of this natural logarithmic of odds ratio. You don't have to calculate the variance of the odds ratio per se. You have to convert the odds ratio in the logarithmic form, and then for the logarithmic odds ratio you need to compute the variance. And so this will be the formula: 1 by A, 1 by B, 1 by C, 1 by D, where A is events in treated group, B is non-events in treated group, C is events in control group, and D is non-events in control group. So after you have calculated the variance of the log odds ratio, you can calculate the standard error in the log odds ratio by just do the under root of the variance of the log odds ratio. Okay, so look at these you can see these are not odds ratios. Okay, this is not odds ratio, this is actually natural logarithmic of odds ratio. Okay, and why? Because we cannot do calculations of the summary effect in terms of ratios. When we have any ratio, we have to convert them into logarithmic forms. I'll tell you at the end maybe why we need to do that. So these are the logarithmic of the odds ratio. You can say they're all in negative form, right? And these are this is the variance in the natural logarithmic of the odds ratio. So this also you can compute using this formula, right? Just told you 1 by A plus 1 by B plus 1 by C plus 1 by D. So remember, this is the variance in the natural logarithmic of odds ratio. For the variance in natural logarithmic of risk ratio, the formula will be a little bit different. It will be actually 1 by A minus 1 by N1, 1 by C plus minus 1 by N2. So that will be different. But the variance we have calculated for all these effect sizes, right? Now same, we know that we are doing fixed effect modeling right now. So the relative weight of the study will be nothing but the reciprocal of this variance in the odds ratio. So for example, for first study, I can show you the relative weight. It will be 1 by 0.1 185, right? So it will be 5.402. Similarly, you can just do reciprocal of all these variances to get the relative weight, and then you obviously need to do some you need to add up these weights to get the total weight of all the studies, right? Now same as we did in the last exercise, we need to compute the product of the effect size of the study and the relative weight of the study, because we know summary effect is nothing but the weighted mean of the studies. So you will multiply this y with this w, so you will get the yw, right? So for example, for first study you will do minus 0.366 into 5.402, so you will get minus 1.978, okay? And then you will do the summary of these product of effect size and relative weight. And now the formula for the summary effect will be pretty much same. It will be this summation of yw divided by summation of w. So as I'm telling you again and again, summary effect is nothing but the weighted mean of the individual study. So it will be minus 30.594 divided by 42.248. So it will also be in minus. That will be the summary natural logarithmic odds ratio, okay? So that's how you get the summary effect. So this is the forest plot for the same. You can see these odds ratios, okay? Here they have not shown the natural logarithmic of the odds ratio, because it just makes more sense in terms of interpretation to see the odds ratio and not the natural logarithmic of odds ratio. So it's common that in forest plots the natural logarithmic odds ratio will not be shown, instead odds ratio will be shown, even though it is natural logarithmic of odds ratio that are used for the calculation of the actual summary effect. So how you calculate odds ratio? It's pretty easy. You just take exponential form of this, like exponential, because these are nothing but natural logarithmic of odds ratio, right? So if I do exponential minus 0.366, right, this is what I will get. I will get 0.69. So you can just take exponential of exponent of these natural logarithmics, and you will get the odds ratio. Similarly, you know how to calculate the relative weights. Right? To calculate the relative weights, for example, I can tell you the relative weight for first study. Relative weight for first study is actually 5.4 divided by 42 into 100. So that is the relative weight of the first study. So that's how you can show the relative weights of the individual studies in the forest plot. And this is the summary effect that we have calculated. But again, the summary effect that we have calculated is in the form of natural logarithmic odds ratio, okay? That is the logarithmic form of the summary effect. If you want to show the summary effect in the forest plot, it makes more sense to convert this also into exponential form. So I will do the exponential form of this to show it in the forest plot. So this is the exponential form of the summary effect which is being shown in the forest plot, okay? So this is the summary odds ratio that we calculated, summation of wy divided by summation of w, right? Summation of wy, that was minus 30, divided by summation of w, that was 42. So this is the summary effect, and remember this summary effect is still in the natural logarithmic form. And of course we have to calculate the variance of the summary effect as well. So the variance will be 1 by summation of w, so that will be 1 by 42.248. So this will be the variance. Now that you have the variance of the summary effect, you can calculate the standard error of the summary effect. This will be under root of this variance, and now you can calculate the lower limit and the upper limit. So the lower limit will be the summary effect minus 1.96 into standard error. So this is your summary effect minus 0.7241 minus 1.96 into standard error, and upper limit will be summary effect plus 1.96 into standard error. So remember, all of this has been like it is still in the logarithmic form. Just for the purpose of representation in your forest plot, you can convert it back into exponential form, but the computation of the summary effects, they have to be done in the logarithmic form only. So these are the upper limits and the lower limits, right? And of course, for calculating z statistic and p values as well, you still need to keep everything in the logarithmic form. So now you will compute the ratio, that will be the summary effect divided by the standard error. The summary effect is the minus 0.7241 and standard error is, it is 0.1539. so this is your Z statistic, and the one tail p value will be 1 minus normal distribution function of minus, so this minus is not significant anyway, this will be removed. So just do 1 minus normal distribution function of this Z. This Z is 4.7068 in this case. So that will be one tail p value, and two tail p value will be just double of this actually. Okay, so you can do this in Excel, you can do this function in Excel, normal distribution function, and let me know in the comment section what is the normal distribution of 4.7068. so this is how you compute the p values. So remember, computing the summary effect as well as the everything, variance, summary, the confidence intervals and the p values, everything is still in the natural logarithmic form. Just when you want to put out your results, you can convert this summary effect and the upper and the lower limits of the summary effect back into the exponential form. But for calculating the p values, you need the Z statistic, and for that Z statistic has to be calculated from the logarithmic form of the effect size. Okay, so you can convert the summary effect into its exponential form to show in your conclusion or in the manuscript, or to show in the forest plot. So for example, this is the summary effect in this case, minus 0.724. so I can convert this into the exponential form, that will be 0.4847, and this is what has been shown in the forest plot, as I told you, this 0.48. so we have converted the natural logarithmic form of the logarithmic form of the summary effect into the exponential form before showing it in the forest plot. Okay, because it just makes more sense, this more interpretable, right? You cannot easily interpret a natural logarithmic of odds ratio as you can interpret the odds ratio itself. Similarly, the lower limit and the upper limits as well, you can take exponential form of them. So you know that okay, this was the lower limit, right, minus 1.0257, and this was the upper limit of the summary logarithmic odds ratio, minus 0.4226. so you can take exponential form of them also to represent the upper limit and the lower limit of the summary odds ratio. Okay, so in conclusion, we have done a fixed effect modeling for studies in which the outcome data was in binary form. Okay, in terms of events and non-events, and what we calculated the summary effect in terms of the natural logarithmic of odds ratio. We calculated the variance, the standard error, we calculated the Z statistic, and ultimately we arrived at p values, right? So this was the summary effect that we got. Summary odds ratio was 0.48 after converting in exponential form, and this is the 95% confidence interval of this odds ratio that I have just calculated, 0.36 to 0.66. The Z statistic was minus 4.71, and this Z statistic was calculated based on the logarithmic data, right? And the p values were this and this respectively. So this is how you do a meta-analysis when the data is in is binary data. So in this case we use odds ratio, but you can also use risk ratio or some other ratio, hazard ratio. The formulas will differ, but the concept will remain same, and remember that the summary effect will be the Z statistic and the p values, all those calculations will involve having the summary effect still in the logarithmic form. So this is the last and the third example where I will take the data is in the correlation is in the form of a correlation coefficient, and again we'll do a fixed effect modeling and we'll compute the summary effect by using this fixed effect model meta-analysis. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 studies, you can see, and the data that is being reported is the correlation coefficient. Maybe it is some study, we can take an example, maybe lung cancer and smoking. So we have the correlation coefficient for each of these individual studies, and we have the sample size for each of the individual studies, right? So in case of correlation data, again, just like for ratios, you need to do all the calculations in the logarithmic form. Similarly, for correlation data, it is generally accepted to do these calculations in the form of Fisher Z, and everything including the summary effect size and everything till you get your p-values, it has to be done in the form of Fisher Z. Just before concluding, in your conclusion, you can convert these the final summary effect in the upper and the lower limit of the Fisher Z back into the correlation coefficient ka form. So this is quite like ratios. Okay, so we'll take an example. We have 6 studies. First, we'll calculate the effect size for each individual studies. So we have correlation for each individual studies. We have to convert these correlation coefficients into Fisher Z. So to convert them into Fisher Z, this is the relationship between Fisher Z and correlation coefficient. It is 0.5 into natural logarithmic of 1 plus r 1 minus r, where r is the correlation coefficient, and this is the variance in Fisher Z. It is 1 by n minus 3, where n is the sample size. So this is a pretty straightforward formula. I'll just show you for first study how will you compute. First study correlation coefficient is 0.5. So 0.5 into natural logarithmic of 1 plus 0.5 divided by 1 minus 0.5. So this will be the Fisher Z for first study, and the variance will be 1 divided by sample size is 40, so it will be 40 minus 3. That will be the variance of the Fisher Z, and then you can calculate the standard error of the Fisher Z. It will be just under root of this variance, iska under root. Okay, so this is how you have computed the effect size. All these effect size, they are nothing but Fisher Z, and these variances are the variance of the Fisher Z. Now, how to compute the weight? I have told you we are doing a fixed effect modeling, so the weight is nothing but the reciprocal of these variances. So for first study, for example, the weight will be 1 divided by 0.270. So that will be the weight of the first study. Similarly, you will compute the weight of all these studies, and then you can compute the summation of these weights, and then you will compute the product of the weight and the effect size, the weight and the Fisher Z, because you know that the summary effect is nothing but the weighted mean of the all the studies. So it will be 0.54 for first study. It will be 0.54 multiplied by 37. So that will be the WY, right? So then you will compute the summary of these WY. So how to compute the summary effect? Pretty straightforward. I hope you understand by now. It will be summation of WY divided by summation of W. So it will be 242.650 divided by 647, right? So that will be the summary effect. But remember, this summary effect is still in Fisher Z form. Okay, so this is how we will compute the summary effect. So this is the summary Fisher Z, 242 divided by 647, right? So that is the summary Fisher Z, and then the variance in the summary effect is obviously 1 by summation of W. So that is nothing but 1 by 647. So this is the variance in the summary Fisher Z. And what will be the standard error of the summary Fisher Z? It will be under root of 0.00154. So this much, this will be the standard error. Then you can calculate the lower limit and the upper limit of the 95% confidence interval of this summary Fisher Z. So it will be the summary effect. What was the summary effect? 0.375 minus 1.96 into standard error, that will be the lower limit, and the summary effect plus 1.96 into standard error, that will be the upper limit. So all of this is still in the form of Fisher Z, remember. Then you will calculate the Z statistic, that will be the summary effect divided by the standard error. So the summary effect was 0.375 divided by, this was your standard error, 0.0393. So this will be your Z statistic. Now you can calculate the one tail and the two tail p-value. One tail p-value will be 1 minus normal distribution of this Z statistic, and two tail will be 2 multiplied by 1 minus normal distribution of this Z statistic. Remember, this p-value is the p-value, one tail p-value, when we made the prediction in the right direction. If we made the prediction in the wrong direction, then instead of using this 9.5396, we will have to use minus 9.5396. So this sign will change. Okay, so now you have calculated the p-values using the Fisher Z. So at last you can convert this Fisher Z metric into the correlation coefficient. So you will use these formulas for converting back the summary Fisher Z, the lower limit and the upper limit of the summary Fisher Z. So what was the summary Fisher Z? It was 0.375. So you can convert this by using this formula. This is the formula: e raised to the power 2 into Fisher Z minus 1. divided by e raised to the power of 2 into Fisher Z plus 1. So we know the summary effect was 0.3750. So you just put this into this formula, and this is the summary correlation coefficient. Similarly, you can calculate the lower limit and the upper limit by using the lower limits and the upper limits of the summary effect, summary Fisher Z. So the lower limit of the summary Fisher Z was 0.29 and upper limit was 0.45. So you will put 0.29 and 0.45 in this formula to get the lower limit of the correlation coefficient and the upper limit. So these you can use, this you can put in your results, and also when you are making a forest plot, it is more meaningful to show the correlation coefficient instead of the Fisher Z, right? So in other words, we have now performed a fixed effect modeling, and we have computed a fixed effect using the fixed effect weights. The summary estimate of the correlation was 0.36 with 95% confidence interval of 0.29 to 0.42. The Z statistic that we calculated was 9.54, right? You can see 9.54, and the one tail p value was this, and the two tail p value was this much. So this is how you do a fixed effect modeling when the data is in the form of correlation, when the output of the data is the correlation coefficient.